Haldi doodh. It's not so much a recipe as it is an insight into how Indians, or the relationship that Indians have with spice. Really, it starts really young. So, I mean, one of the starting spices, and I know I've done a few videos on turmeric, but it's such a storyteller of a spice for me. So what I'm doing today is Haldi doodh, and Haldi doodh is turmeric milk. And it's basically one of the first experiences of spice that we give to our children to train their palates from a young age to be able to sort of consume this food. But it also speaks to a few different points. One is to, I guess, turmeric itself, which is really a spice that I term, it's a cradle to grave spice for Indians. So it's one of the first spices that you'll consume and one of the last to stay in the diet. The traditional Ayurvedic system of eating means that obviously from a flavour perspective for young palates, you're dealing with very soft spice, which isn't sort of high in contrast and shocking in texture, and that's the way to acclimatise, I guess, a naive palate to more and more complex flavour profiles, and turmeric is really part of that at the beginning. As we age and our body systems begin to slow down, the same thing occurs again, whereby we start to, instead of building our palate for complexity, we start to tail off, because there's a lot in certain aspects of spice. So in hot spices and acidic spices, and even in high salt, that is inflammatory for the system. But as we get older, we want less of that. The cleanest analogy is it's like putting rocket fuel in a retro car. When you're younger, you're like a Formula One car. I mean, you're growing, your metabolism, everything's at speed. You can handle quite a lot in your system and in your diet and kind of get away with it. But as you get older, the chassis changes and the engine ages and everything gets a little bit slower. And so ultimately, in the end, you're eating foods with softer spices, and turmeric is one that stays right to the end. So it is very much a spice that we carry with us. So as an introduction, it's one of the simplest ways to get your kids used to spice, and it's also a really easy way to get turmeric into your diet without spending $5 a day on a turmeric latte. I'm just going to add sort of 2/3 of a teaspoon into about a cup of milk, which sweetens a little bit of the bitterness. That fat sort of blankets the bitterness for a young mouth. So you don't need to add honey, and that just gets heated on the stovetop really gently. And it has that beautiful yellow colour instantly. Now, of course, the thing about turmeric in this capacity when you're feeding it to children is you can add a little bit of honey, but if you can get away with not adding a little bit of honey, it's not so much about the sugar consumption that the honey contributes, because a little bit of sweetness is never bad, especially not in that kind of natural form. It's just more about acclimatising a young palate to the idea that a food that is unfamiliar, which bitterness often is to a young palate, can still be considered interesting, helping kids to kind of behave that way and to have that attitude to food. It's a really fundamental way to ensure health for a lifetime, is training a palate, training a child to be able to take on curious flavour, to not default to sort of simple sweetness, simple acidity, sort of those very simple, easy pleasures that don't facilitate the same health response for the entire body and for the entire system. Oh, it smells so good. And if you had a little frothy whisk or a coffee machine at home, you can froth this as well. Pull the proteins in the milk. Thicker, smoother, creamier. That's it. Put this in a little glass. Colour. Let's go. I love the smell of warmed milk too. It has that really kind of nutty aroma. Oh, it's so delicious. It's not even remotely bitter. It has all of the base profile of a turmeric chai without the extraneous flavor additions. It's a really soft drink. It's very soft. You can feel the softness in the mouth and the way that the body will interpret that experience as well, that bodily experience of soft flavor.